You're listening to Living with Louie. Well, hello, folks, and welcome to this week's edition of Living with Louie. Our guest today is Debra Kostiw. She's an author of the #1 bestseller, Forget Me Not, and runs a Answers About Aging and Alzheimer's, and does training, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Deborah, training caregivers how to better manage some of the behaviors that they encounter when they're working with folks such as myself. And so I'll let you tell a little bit more about yourself, Deborah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Larry. And I am so proud and happy to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners. Um, so, like you mentioned, I kind of wear many hats these days. So, um, I I'm a trainer for Alzheimer's and other dementias, but not just family caregivers, but also professionals. And I also go to like really large care communities and train entire teams of staff and doctors, nurses, social workers, aides, right down to housekeeping and dining services. Um, but the main purpose of my life continuing forward until the end now, because I recently turned 60, I have decided to dedicate the rest of my life to disrupting dementia care on a huge, wide scale. Like, I am going to be the earthquake. And I'm very passionate about what I do. I think that some of my personal story, but in order to help a person with dementia, you have to train the caregiver. And so that's where my real focus is, the person with dementia, but I can't get to them without going through the caregiver. So that's where I concentrate my training and my knowledge.
Well, I just know from our meeting and our first talking that your passion um, came from love, and and I know that I don't know how long ago it's been that you lost your mother, but I know that just that whole experience of your mom having Alzheimer's and all the things that you went through kind of developed the passion that you have for making sure that more people are treated with care and respect and understanding. And that's difficult, I'm sure. I have talked before about how difficult I think it can be to work with me, with my wife, my wife, and what she has to encounter with me. I know it's been a subject with my therapy team on how I can better manage myself.
Mm.
Um, to It used to be that my day, because of the things that you lose, your dexterity and um, the things that you used to do that are so simple, washing dishes even, became this exercise, and oftentimes it's very frustrating, very aggravating, and I just keep loading my frustrations, my aggravations into this truck all day long. And my wife would get home from work, and what do? I dump the truck right on her. Why? Because she's the only one there. My dogs, they'll listen, but they aren't gonna, you know. But my therapist said, "Well, why don't you start writing down some of the things that are frustrating you throughout your day? And before she comes home, why don't you look down that list, and you'll find probably that a lot of them really were quite passing and really don't need to be dumped."
Mm.
So, um, controlling the dump truck is what I would call it, and uh, so I'm sure that it's very difficult from a caregiver's perspective to deal with some of the things that we present to them.
Right. Right. And it's interesting, Larry, that you say that because I mean it goes both ways, right? And the closer that we are in a relationship, the easier it is to just kind of let things out or explode or like we treat those who are closest to us, I think oftentimes differently or sometimes even worse than we might a stranger, right? So, and that comes from both ends.
I don't know. My filter's pretty short with strangers.
Yeah. Mine.
At this point in my life, it is.
Yeah.
If they're treating me with dignity and respect, and I'm fine. But I've had a couple of encounters with people who um, have a predetermined um, picture of what's going on with me, and it can get nasty. And frequently, if that happens, well, not frequently, if that happens, then I have a tendency to just, blast them with both barrels.
Good. Good. I'll be right there with you, Larry.
Well, I find what you're doing so needed, um, that because there's no the hardest things that you do in your life, dealing with a loved one and dealing with the dementia part of this. And my father-in-law had Parkinson's, and then later
Mm.
developed the dementia piece. And I remember when I first went over to his house and met him, and it was kind of early on, and he says, "Here," he goes, "take this book and read it." He says, "It'll tell you what's going to kill me." And it was a book on Parkinson's. So the man was he was very much into understanding his own condition. And I told him, I said, "That's okay. You can have it. I would just assume just you and I do what we're gonna do, and we'll do it." We took him shopping once for a television set. He he was with a walker, and he did not like being in the public with his walker. It made him uncomfortable. And I said, "Well, that's okay." I said, "We're going to figure this out." Went to uh, Sam's Club, which is a big box store like Costco and some of those. And I got him a cart. And I said, "Here, nobody's going to know that you're using this as your walker. Let's go get your TV." And that's how we went about it.
Yeah.
And so it's finding ways, I think, to help with independence and dignity,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
I think that's key,
Right.
and that's just my opinion, and that's worth a lot. But just kidding. But I'm really interested in the program that you have to offer, and I certainly know that this is something that I see a lot posted on the Facebook groups. A lot of times it's frustration from caregivers.
Yeah. Yeah. That the frustration from the caregiver comes mostly from just lack of skill and lack of knowledge. I find
Well,
that whenever I teach my course, the students, even the students who are pretty well versed in dementia, they are they're shocked actually by the discoveries that they find about how because when you hear the word dementia, people I think immediately go to memory loss, right? And forgetfulness. And they don't realize that it's things like what you and I were talking about earlier, like being able to navigate your environment and even to walk and put one foot in front of the other. Or like how you mentioned washing dishes, right? So understanding the feelings of others and consequences for actions and words, or being able not to find the right word. There's just so much more involved in it. Involves all of the senses and all of the brain and all of the body. It's not just memory. And I think that caregivers struggle mainly because it's almost like they're asked to perform open heart surgery with no training.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
kind of the analogy that I could closely associate that to. But once they once they learn the skills and how to handle when things come up, because they're going to come up, but the more that they have the tools to work with, the more success they're going to have. And the more success they have, then it makes the process easier for the person with dementia.
I will tell you that I'm just going to use this as an example. My my wife was in the kitchen one day and she was rearranging things.
Mm.
I'm like, you can't do that. She goes, oh, but it'll work better this way. And I was just like, no, you. I said, I need you to just let me let me tell you how it will affect me or is affecting me. I need to know where things are, and I will not remember that you just rearranged this kitchen, and instead I'll be tearing it to pieces looking for something. I said, if you if as long as you're okay with where I'm putting them, then can I please do that? And she said, I never thought of it that way. And she had it. But as soon as she realized that that's what it was going to cause for me, she was fine with letting me put it the way I needed it to be.
Yeah, it's almost just like they don't know what they don't know, right?
Well, right, right. I mean, do you have children?
I do.
You do.
I do.
Okay. The most difficult job that you have ever been given in your life was children. You can go buy the simplest thing. You can go buy a toaster, and anybody should be able to operate a simple toaster. And it comes with a book that tells you how to do it.
Hmm.
But when you have a child, there they are, fresh from God, with no book,
Right.
no instruction manual. And then we age and we get to this point. Nobody has all the answers for what's happening to you or how it's going to progress. They have ideas, but it's the most difficult things. Just seems like there's no real access to instructions on how. And obviously, you've done extensive research and developing the program that you have, and certainly, I would think that you learned a lot from the life experience that you shared with your mother.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that you wanted me to share some of that today, right?
Uh, if you're comfortable, that's fine. I mean, I know that kind of really was what kind of set you on fire to put you down this road that you're going down.
Yeah. It really that's a good way to put it. Set me on fire. I love that, Larry. Um, so my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I think she was on the slowest progression of Alzheimer's disease, which was a blessing for a long time. Um, and as she declined, and I, as the helpful daughter, was stepping in more to assist, the more she resented that. And so our relationship was deteriorating. And at the same time, I had opened up a home care business, and I took the highest level course at the Alzheimer's Association, and they asked me if I would teach it. And I thought, well, geez, that sounds great. I'm going to give that a try. So I taught teaching for the Alzheimer's Association, and I did that for many years, and I absolutely loved it. And I learned even more from the people that I was teaching and hearing their stories. And It was just fascinating, and I found that's where I really found my love of teaching, and so I'll always be thankful for them, for the Alzheimer's Association for that experience. Um, but the story of my mother is a completely different story than how I kind of became who I am as a trainer and a professional, but they obviously intertwine together. But my mother, she ultimately, as she started to decline and I was helping out more and more, um, she she began to resent, she wanted to maintain her independence. And at this point, she still was living independently at home and still driving. She had a couple of accidents. There were a lot of red flags. So we were having the discussions about, driving and moving and things like that. And unbeknownst to me, my brother, who lived out of state, came and had her sign a brand new power of attorney, which did not include me anymore. And when she
Hmm.
showed it to me, she like presented it to me. I was devastated because my brother had moved away. Oh my gosh, I don't even know how many years, 30 years ago. And, calls once a week on Sunday for a half an hour and comes into town for one weekend a year. And all of a sudden, but she still wanted me to be her healthcare proxy. So it was very, hurt me to the core. And
I'm
then
sure.
And then about a week later, he came and he moved her to another state. And he was charging her rent. And, at first, according to her friends, she was really enjoying it. She wanted to move and get to know her grandchildren and great grandchildren there because she really had never known them very well.
Right.
So I respected her decision. I I know many, many elder law attorneys in my area, and I seeked all of their advice, and there was a lot of really great advice. Um, but the thing that we decided really was, she's already kind of angry. She wants to go. Um, could she pass if you sued for guardianship? Probably not, but she'll resent you even more if you do that. So just let her go. She'll probably come to her senses and want to come home sooner than later. Well, within 3 days, I got the first urgent call that my brother had filed for a bankruptcy, and all the money from the sale of her condo was in question. And I thought, wow, that was really fast. But that got resolved, and she ended up staying there for 2.5 years. But my brother lost his job, and he and his second wife moved. I think it was about 2 hours away from the children and grandchildren that my mother originally had gone there to be near. So the three of them moved to a house that my mother bought. And then, of course, my brother didn't know how to take care of someone with dementia. He really didn't know what he was getting into. So I don't know. I mean,
What he thought he was getting into was financial freedom, and what he ended up getting into was something that he was well over his head.
yes. And my brother has had mental health issues, suicidal issues.
Hmm.
I mean, it goes on and on and on. And so he definitely was in way over his head. And so it came to the point where he and his wife, they worked all day, Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, they would leave for the whole weekend. So now mom was alone all the time. And she told me that they weren't setting up their pills anymore. She fell in the shower and broke her clavicle. She wanted a caregiver to come in to help her with
Hmm.
bathing, but that never happened. She wanted to go to church. She wasn't allowed to go to church. She wanted to go to the pool and go swimming, and that never happened. But the promises were always there, that they were going to do this for her and do that for her. And then there was starting to be a lack of food in the house because they were never home, and they ate a lot of fast food, and my mother never liked fast food. So,
Well, and when they're out getting fast food, they're not thinking about what her dinner's going to look like. You know,
right.
that's
And then she
hmm.
told me that it got to the point where she thought they needed to work on their marriage. And so she would retreat to her bedroom to give them privacy, and she would fall asleep and they wouldn't wake her up for dinner. And then she would get up and they were already in bed. So it was not a good situation. And most of this I found out after she
Yeah,
passed away, right?
right.
But there were many times when I was packing my bags to go and get her, and my husband would stop me and remind me that my brother is a gun collector and that we really didn't think that he would hesitate to pull a gun on me if I were to show up there unexpectedly. So there were many times when I was ready to go and get her and I didn't. And of course, the regret now,
Yes.
um,
It's
and that's a big part of why I do what I do, is to try to get other people not to have regrets, or at least
not to
not.
have it happen to them.
Yeah. So um, things came to a head finally. She was there for 2.5 years, and I hadn't seen her that whole time. There were many phone calls that were very confusing, distraught. Like she couldn't manage the phone with an area code number any longer. She couldn't manage the TV remote. So she really had declined and she was struggling. But it came to a head and she was going to move back home here. So my husband and I, we went out and we found her a beautiful assisted living. We weren't sure if she needed memory care or assisted living. So we found a community that had room in both so that she would start in assisted. And if she needed to move, there was room for her to make that move. Everything was arranged. It took about 30 days. Um, and she just wanted me to come and get her. And I said, let's do this the right way. Um, we had all her medications shipped. She had to have, her physical and everything for assisted living, and her meds were here. She was supposed to arrive on Wednesday at 7 p.m. at the airport. We had an escort for her on the plane. Everything was ready to go. And on the Saturday before, my husband and my daughter and I were at the assisted living putting the final touches on her room. And my phone rang and it was my niece. And I had been arguing back and forth with my brother about some of my mother's Ethan Allen furniture. Because when she moved from New York to Ohio, she gave all of her Ethan Allen furniture to the niece. She didn't even have her headboard or even her dresser.
Hmm.
She didn't even get to keep her
Anything that
bedroom
was
set.
familiar to her.
Right.
Right.
So I was kind of in negotiation with my brother, who was talking to his daughter about what pieces my mom wanted to bring back with her. And there was some discrepancies about a Bombay chest and a couple of Waterford lamps. And by this time, I was just like, I could care less about these lamps. I just want my mom back. So, we had parties planned. We had, oh my gosh, we had everything planned and ready to go. So on Saturday, we were at the assisted living putting the final touches, expecting to see her in about 4 days. And my brother, I call him my suicidal brother, was driving her to the bank for the last trip to the bank. And he had the cruise control on, and supposedly he felt dizzy and was going to pass out, but he didn't make it in time, and he drove 55 miles an hour into a tree and he killed her.
My.
And when I found him at the hospital, what he said to me just shows the level of, I don't even know a word for it, inhumanity. I don't even know the right word, but he said to me, now, mind you, my brother and I we've had very, very few conversations in probably the past 18 years. I had kind of decided that I didn't want him in my life a long,
Right.
long, 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 long time ago. So he's in the hospital and he said to me, and I have it on video. It's actually on one of my YouTube videos at Answers About Alzheimer's on YouTube. But he said, I was driving. I didn't feel good. I thought I was going to pass out, but I guess I didn't have enough time, and I must have passed out, and I drove 55 miles an hour into a tree. And he said, I have a crushed larynx, a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and oh, by the way, mom didn't make it.
Wow. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's just such a tragic story.
Yeah, and I think the worst was at the funeral was when the stories came out from all of her friends. Her friends were telling me I would only call when I knew they were at work so she could talk more freely. And I was like, what are you talking about? And oh, Cindy would lock up the dog so mom couldn't play with the dog. And um, and then the worst story was the physical abuse that happened between my sister-in-law and my mother when she got up to go to the bathroom. She grabbed her by the
Mm.
wrists um, and that story, I just couldn't even believe that she didn't tell me that that had happened. And when I confronted my brother about it, which is also on tape, and you can hear it on the YouTube video, he admitted to all of it. He said, "Yeah, mom came in and she showed me her bruises and her red marks." And I said, "You know, did you take her to the hospital? Did you go get
It
X-rays?" And he's like,
Did it
"No."
ever occur to you that's not okay?
Yeah.
Right.
And I just so it was like the horror just kept continuing. You know what I mean? It was like hearing all these stories, and then your mind just starts going crazy about what other, like she was living in hell for the last 2.5 years. Like it wasn't even that she just had dementia, which is bad
It
enough, but
Right,
then
what
to
she
be
had was
being abused psychologically, physically, emotionally, financially,
every
was
level.
was just beyond me. It was more than I could handle. It was more than I could handle. And so I turned that. There was a lot of anger for a long time, probably
No
still.
doubt.
But this is how I'm doing something good with it. And I don't mean to.
You know, I did a podcast on, on how to come out of the pain, turn your pain into, and that's, to me, that's exactly what I'm hearing from you, is you took this pain and turned it into purpose, finding purpose in the pain that you went through.
Yeah.
And that's, so do me a favor and please tell my listeners all about your YouTube channel, because I certainly want to continue this with you. I know you and I have had discussions about doing a piece on behavior and communication and some of the other aspects of this.
Yeah.
And I really just wanted everyone to get a sense of who's Debra,
Yeah.
and really what's Debra all about. And so please take a minute and tell them all about what they can find on your YouTube channel and what services you have to offer, because I think that they're very valuable.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry. So you can find me on YouTube at Answers About Alzheimer's. But we don't just talk about Alzheimer's, we talk about all dementias. There are many, many, many videos on there, and there's also shorts. But the channel is kind of designed to give people an idea of the style of teaching and to give you some really, really important tips, like if you're dealing with, I want to go home, or specific behaviors. You can find a lot of really great tips and information in there. But in order to get a really comprehensive, if you will, um, kind of like becoming that open heart surgeon, right?
Right?
That's my goal, is to get people to that level. Um, and that comes from the course, and that's the Certified Master Dementia Strategist course. You can also go to Answers About Alzheimer's website, which is where you'll find more about the course.
Well, I really look forward to working with you and collaborating with you on some of the other subjects that we've talked about. And wow, I really appreciate the fact that you reached out to me through one of the Facebook groups, because it's meeting people like yourself that and spreading the awareness, and it's not just the awareness of Lewy body, but it's awareness of dementia overall, and how to best um, help your loved ones is a great piece, and a great addition to what I've been trying to accomplish. So I want to thank you. And you're also the author, I believe, of a #1 bestseller, if I'm not mistaken, called Forget Me Not.
Yes.
So
Yes.
then that's available on Amazon Books, I would assume.
Amazon and anywhere that you can order books, any bookstore can get it for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, very, very good. With that, I will say that we will continue this. So thank you so much for your time today, Deborah.
Thank you, Larry, for everything that you do. It's a pleasure.
Well, I look forward to this adventure together. So thank you. We'd like to thank you for joining us for this edition of Living with Louie.